So I'm really pleased to see a good turnout today, our members and friends and candidates. For this primary forum, we invited candidates from local races which had more than 2 people running. We don't often undertake a forum for primary elections, but we're excited to see such a lot of interest locally this year in the elections. I think we have all of the candidates for the 40th district at the speakers table already. So I'm going to introduce Janet Ott, who is a long-standing league member and who will moderate this forum. She will explain the rules and she'll introduce the candidates. Thanks, Janet.
Thank you, Heather. So we are, as Heather said, we're starting with the 40th Legislative District State Representative Race Position 1, and there are 6 candidates for this position on the primary ballot, and I'll introduce them to you now in alphabetical order. So there's Rud Browne, Debra Lekanoff, Daniel Miller, Tom Pasma, Michael Petrish, and Alex Ramel. I'm going to give you a quick, short description of their role, the role that they are running for. So during legislative sessions, the legislature is called upon to enact or reject legislation affecting public policy in the state, to provide for the levy and collection of taxes and other revenue, to support state government and assist local government, and appropriate funds for these purposes. The House also has the exclusive power to bring impeachment proceedings. Although laws are enacted only when the legislature is convened in formal session, policy issues and the general operation of state and local government are under continuous review by legislators serving on permanent and interim study committees. Washington state representatives serve 2-year terms, and their annual salary is $47,776. So before we begin, I'm going to go over the rules for the forum this morning. So the candidates will have up to 2 minutes each for an opening statement. They will have 1 minute to respond to each question asked, and they will all make a 1-minute closing statement. Also, each candidate has a challenge card. Could you please hold up your challenge cards? Thank you. Candidates may use this card to challenge or rebut their opponent's response. The challenging candidate will have 45 seconds to state their challenge, and then their opponent will have 45 seconds to respond to the challenge. And each candidate may use their challenge card only 1 time during the question and answer period. So candidates, just simply hold up your card when you wish to challenge someone on a particular question, and then please wait till all the candidates have responded to the question before making your challenge. I'll let you know when to go. So, candidate Ramel, your 2-minute opening statement, please.
Good morning. Thanks, Janet. Thanks, Heather, and thanks to the League for bringing this together. It's an important civil service. Thank you. My name is Alex Ramel. I'm a single dad. I'm an environmental organizer, and I'm an unflinching Democrat. I believe a political campaign should start off with a vision of how our community can be more and do more together, and I'd like to share parts of that vision with you. My vision is that Washington State can be a national example of bold climate action based on sound science that will make our kids proud of us. My vision is that our state can be a full partner with us locally in confronting the growing housing crisis and make sure that everyone here can have a home that they can afford. My vision is that we should follow the moral leadership from our youngest citizens and put in place common sense gun violence protection measures that have been on hold for far too long. My vision is that every child in Washington State belongs in a top quality school. My vision is that quality health care is a basic human right. So if you share that vision, you know how much work we still have left to do. As Heather said in the opening comments, it takes a big team to get anything done. And that team needs a leader, needs folks with experience bringing people together and collaborating. And that's where I think I stand out in this race. And I'll have time to share just one example with you. Because of my strong record working for clean air and clean water, I'm the only candidate in this race endorsed by the Washington Conservation voters. I've also been endorsed by the United Steelworkers, who represent the refinery employees working in Anacortes. Those aren't groups you expect to always see side by side, but working together, we've found collaboration and common ground. The skills that built that coalition are the skills that will make me the best representative for our vision in Olympia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Petrish, your opening statement, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for having this open forum today in Bellingham. My name is Michael Petrish, born and raised in Anacortes. A little bit about myself and my background. My family were refugees and immigrants, so I have the story of an immigrant and a refugee background. My mom's family leaving Croatia in World War II, traveling 5 years, 5,000 miles, 5 countries, 3 continents, and 3 languages, none of which are English, to come to this country to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I worked growing up in a Croatian home. We had the Croatian language as part of our life, and I had the opportunity to study abroad. And that led, as I grew older, had the opportunity to work in the former Yugoslavia as an interpreter for NATO and for the United States military in the former Yugoslavia. I spent 4.5 years there working with people from the villager all the way up to a 4-star general and everybody in between. The Dayton Peace Accord was signed in 1995 in Dayton, Ohio. I was one of the individuals that was asked to be a part of that agreement after it was signed, to work on the ground, bringing people together that had been former combatants, that we had to make that work together to make the peace survive so people could get on with their lives. I worked with NGOs, we worked with refugees, and bringing their lives back together so they could live in peace. Right now I'm a union carpenter. I represent 6 states for the Pacific Northwest Regional Council of Carpenters. I'm on their e-board. So I represent Alaska, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana. 25,000 of our members and their families. I'm also a member of Local 70 here in Mount Vernon in Skagit County, where we represent 1,800 families in the 5 northern counties of the state of Washington. I take that responsibility very seriously, as I'm also a trustee to that local, and I oversee the local's finances. It is my goal to take that seriousness to Olympia, to be your voice, to be your representative, and to look out for the taxpayers' money in the best way possible. And I'm asking for your vote, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Candidate Pasma, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this forum today and allowing me to come up here and share some ideas and answer some questions. My name is Tom Pasma, and I'm running to be your next representative from the 40th Legislative District. You know, in our district and in our state, people are suffering. Students are graduating college with unmanageable debt. Families are finding it harder and harder to make ends meet, and good-paying jobs are just too few. The people of this state deserve a new deal. A new deal means we will provide students with the best education possible without saddling them with debt, which hurts their ability to achieve their dreams. A new deal means we're committed to creating union jobs with good wages and developing industries that will move our state towards a green and sustainable economy. A new deal means we protect our quality of life by investing in our social services, increasing our community resiliency, and rebuilding our broken infrastructure. I will fight to make sure our values are protected in Olympia, and that the investments we make as a state will go towards creating a better future for everyone. You know, I really look forward to speaking with everybody throughout the district, and hope I can count on your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Miller, your opening statement, please.
Hello, how are you doing? So my name is Daniel Miller, and some of you know me from running 2 years ago. I've ran several times, and each time I get some pretty good votes up here in Whatcom County, and I'm hoping I can do it again. I'm the other Republican. The Republican, there's 2 Republicans in the race, and I'm the other Republican. And I care about, first a little bit about myself. I went to Evergreen State College, where I studied public policy and political economy. I also attended the University of Washington, where I studied law a little bit, and Skagit Valley Community College. I believe that the state of Washington is facing some important decisions in the next few years, and I believe I'm qualified to be your representative up there in the 40th District. During the course of this event, I hope you ask some really important questions. I want to bring up taxes. I could be counted on not to just raise taxes willy-nilly. I want to talk about environmental policy. I don't see how you can talk about global warming and sustainable development unless you talk about the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room, which is geoengineering, AKA weather intervention, AKA strategic injection, AKA chemtrails. It's making people sick. It's spraying aluminum, barium, and a lot of chemicals in the atmosphere. I call scorpion skies. I care about taxes. I want to use marijuana tax money on affordable housing, and I want to find out where it went, you know. My name is Daniel Miller. I believe in the Constitution and religious liberty.
Thank you. Candidate Lekanoff, your opening statement, please.
Good morning. I'm Debra. I am your Washington State candidate and policymaker who's asking for your vote. I am your Alaska Native. I am your Native American woman. I am that woman of diversity that Bellingham has been calling for in the 40th. I'm going to do a little bit of formality. As a monarchy of my Native American culture, I'm going to do protocol. Thank you to Lummi Nation for welcoming all of us into your homelands this morning. It's a great honor for me to say the great Lummi Nation has solely endorsed me. They believe I can carry all of our voices to Olympia. You know, what makes me a little bit different and unique from my other candidates? You can tell I look a little different up here. I sound a little different. I am unique in this candidate race as I am someone new to the Democratic Party that really welcomes and embraces all of your values that are so intertwined with mine. You know, I bring to the 40th 20 years of experience a vast amount of networking from the congressional, state, local, international level. You'll Google me and you'll find Debra Lekanoff in protection of the Salish Sea, Debra Lekanoff in protection of the wild salmon, Debra Lekanoff in protection of defending one of the biggest and largest coal terminals. Thank goodness, and let's give a round, well, we can't do a round of applause, we'll do a nod. A hand raise. We said hell no to the coal terminals, and thank you to Lummi Nation, the tribes, all of the organizations, and my citizens and my fellow candidates here who all played a role in it. Thank you to the 40th and to Bellingham for helping me establish a wonderful career in the past 16 years down in the Skagit. If you close your eyes and you pause for just a moment, there are great, wonderful things we are all looking for. Protection of the Salish Sea, protection of the wild salmon, preservation of the Skagit River, only river in the lower 48 preserving all 5 species of wild salmon, education, affordable health care, and homelessness. These are all areas that I particularly have worked on across this great nation. It's an honor to be your Native American who's going to serve the 40th.
Thank you. Candidate Brown, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, and thank you to the League. In a world of disappearing media, you remain one of the few local voices, so thank you very much for the coverage. My name is Rud Browne, and I was born in Australia. My father had 4 heart attacks when I was a child, forcing my family onto welfare. I left school at 16 to help out, and then both my father and my brother died when I was 17, creating even greater stress and hardship in the family. I've worked as an apprentice mechanic, a fisherman, taught myself computer programming at 23, came to Canada at 29, married my bride, a nurse, at 30, started a high-tech green business started a high-tech green business that operated in 5 countries and provided employment for 360 people. I became a US citizen in 2002, and I've been recognized as an Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year and received several awards from Inc. magazine and others for my business, environmental, and workplace achievements. You're here to learn the differences between us, so let's start with 4 things that demonstrate my commitment to the 40th District and democracy itself. I've donated time and money for over 20 years to a broad range of community groups on issues like homelessness, healthcare, insurance costs, water quality, environment, and kids. I built a business that created 360 family wage jobs. I was personally responsible for a $75 million budget, and I didn't use your tax dollars to do it. Since 2014, I've served as an elected member of the Whatcom County Council, this year as Council Chair, a legislative role that is responsible for oversight of a $200 million budget and 100 different programs. I have the skill and experience of 30 years in business and 4 years in local government to be able to best serve you and the community. I want to finish by saying I'm passionate about democracy and the values of the League of Women Voters, which is why I joined. I believe in voting in the primaries. I believe in complying with financial disclosure rules required of candidates by the Public Disclosure Commission. Unfortunately, not all my opponents have done the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's time for the first question, and here is the first question. There is a lot of fear, anger, and hate in our political rhetoric right now. How will you be a voice of hope and change? And I'm going to start with candidate Petrish. Please, you have 1 minute.
I would have to agree with the question and the statement being there's a lot of animosity right now. And we need people that are able to come to a table or come into a room and sit down and negotiate a deal or negotiate legislation that is best for everybody who lives in the state of Washington and in our district. I've had that opportunity in the past. I've been in that position where I sat at a table with people that were weeks before were shooting at one another. So having the opportunity to sit down, find what's best for everybody involved in the process, and bring real conversation to the table as opposed to animosity and hate. We need to be able to sit down as adults, and more importantly, we need to sit down as citizens with one another. Look at each other in the eye and look what is best for everybody who lives in our district, not just a political platform or political ideology. It has to be what's best for the people of our district and our state. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Miller, your response. 1 minute, please.
Yeah, well, at Evergreen, I attended many forums up there in Capitol Hill, or AKA Olympia, Capitol Hill, and I'm a Republican, and I got along great with the Democrats. I studied Washington State governance with Senator Karen Frazier, and we got along great. And actually, if I do get elected, I want to talk to Senator Karen Frazier and work with her. So I can work across the aisles. But then there's certain things, you know, like I can be counted on not to just go out and willy-nilly raise taxes. So there's certain things that we have to say we're going to do, but I work great across the aisle. And at Evergreen State College, I work with Democrats, Republicans, Greens, anarchists, things, you know, so I can be counted on. And basically all the candidates up here are good. They're just like a good cup of coffee. You know, when you go into a coffee shop, you get 6 choices. Here you got 6 choices. So thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Ramel, your response, please.
So I already mentioned my experience bringing together environmentalists and union refinery workers. I'll mention another example. I was founder of the Community Energy Challenge, where we brought together small businesses, local and state government, unions, energy utilities to make one of the most effective energy efficiency upgrade programs anywhere in the country. That success comes from finding common interests and common values, and listening deeply and understanding what it takes and what the needs of each of those participants was. And perhaps the hardest of those to identify was the common ground between the electric company and the gas company. That's a skill set that's important and that we need more of in Olympia. Thanks.
Thank you. Candidate Brown, your response, please.
I love this question because it's really, it goes to the core of what everybody's looking for nowadays. My whole life has been about change. It's about digging myself out of poverty to begin with. It's then about bringing 2 other generations out of poverty along with me. It's about creating living wage jobs with benefits for 360 people. And it's about doing it in a way that was running, my business was involved in the recycling of electronic waste. So both in the process of building a strong business, I also had a fairly significant environmental impact. I'll bring 2 examples of what I've done since I've been on the county council. One is, it became obvious to me very early on being on the council that there was a lot of tension between the Lummi Nation and the city of Bellingham and Whatcom County. So I hosted a dinner at my house with the Lummi leadership, the county executive and the mayor and other council members. And the whole purpose was to say, let's just find the common areas that we can work on. Let's not talk about conflicts. Let's find something that we can move forward on. And it was a very productive exercise.
Thank you. Candidate Pasma, your response, please.
Thank you for that question. I go about it how I always have, as a volunteer citizen and the only person up here that has actually gotten legislation passed, from taxes to rural to senior citizens with bipartisan support. It's because you sit down, you have that conversation, you find the common ground, and then you go and make the best, what's the best for everyone. And the only way you have that conversation is you go in and you don't point fingers, you sit down and say, I'd like to have your ideas, your thoughts. I've proven that throughout the state also with having forums in, like an OMAC, 2-day forums inviting everyone. And I tell people before we open the doors, you're going to agree on 98% of the issues, there's 2%. But if we talk about it, we can make the difference. And you speak with people with dignity and respect and ask them for their ideas and how we can come to a conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Candidate Lekanoff, your response, please.
Thank you so much. You know, it's been a wonderful experience here in the 40th. I've been able to bring international, provincial, state, congressional, federal together on addressing the most important issue within the 40th, and that's protection of the Salish Sea. Being able to have an environmental policy platform, understanding all issues and jurisdiction of governing bodies to do one thing. How do we do things better within the 40th? How do we grow the 40th in a way that reflects all of your values? As the Native American woman here, and I keep raising that because I don't think you all realize how wonderful it is to be sitting here, because there has never been someone in position 1 in the 40th that says, I want to bring my values and my 7th generation and holistic way of making decisions and provide it here at the 40th. To be able to bring all governing bodies together and understand their jurisdiction and their roles and responsibility is quite outstanding. I think this is why Gina McCarthy with EPA says I'm the strongest environmental advocate within this race.
Thank you. Question number 2. If elected, what legislation would you make a personal priority to pass because you believe it would most benefit the people of your district, and why do you choose it? So we'll start with Candidate Pasma, please. 1 moment for your response.
With me? I'm sorry. Excuse me. Well, the first thing I would do is we have to fully fund education that's sustainable. That's an investment. The greatest investment that we can ever make as society is funding our education system that is done fairly and sustainable. And the way it was done this last year is not a sustainable solution. So that would be the first thing I would want to do.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Browne.
I break it into 2 categories. There's what I'd want to do for the community overall, and I think the #1 priority at the moment is affordable housing, and closely followed by that is healthcare. But on a very specific issue is one that I've chosen to use as, for the campaign awareness, is the issue of kids who cannot get identification. I sent out a flyer, many of you may have received it in the mail, that talks about the problem of that we've created a society where if you lose your identification or don't have access to it, as a child, it's incredibly difficult to get it. This was an issue that I became aware of in discussion with Northwest Youth Services. But last night, a good friend of my son turned up to visit, and I showed him the brochure. This guy's 32 years old, and he looked at the brochure and he said, that's exactly what happened to me. And I said to him, what do you mean? He says, when I was 16, I was in the foster system. They didn't do the paperwork properly. I had to leave my foster home because my mother was using prescription medications, and I could not work at all because I had no identification.
Thank you. Candidate Miller, your response, please.
So I can't really narrow it down to just one thing. I want to work on real-world solutions to help working families and the elderly. One thing we could do is a property tax relief for working families and the elderly. One thing I really do want to do as soon as I get there, I want to find out where some of this marijuana tax money went. When we voted to legalize marijuana in the state of Washington, they said there'd be huge amounts of tax revenue. And I don't know what happened to that tax revenue. We can use some of that tax revenue maybe to do the relief for seniors and working families on property tax. Also use some of that for affordable housing, perhaps education. So the first thing I want to do when I get there is I want to find out where some of that money went. You know, there's a lot of money in the state of Washington, a lot more than they're letting on. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Lekanoff, your response, please.
Thank you. You know, we're being asked continuously, you know, what committees do you want to sit on? Luckily, I've had several years in Olympia, so I understand which committees I'd like to sit on. The first one is the Finance Committee. I strongly believe in tax reform. I strongly believe that we need to take a look in Washington State of what we can do better, to take a look at the classes and the preferences. Taxes shouldn't be on the backs of so many of our senior citizens and our property owners. I want to be able to take the work that Chris Litton, who has solely endorsed me as your incumbent, and take a look at the work that she's done on the senior citizen tax, property tax, the cookie cutter tax that's being brought upon our most precious senior citizens who have taken care of us. We should take care of them. The other areas we want to look at is the B&O tax reform, and then also making sure that the records document tax stays local and that it's accountable. Taxation is a big word, and there are many conversations that happen about it. However, in the Finance Committee, being a part and a member of that is going to be helpful for all of us in the 40th.
Thank you. Candidate Petrish, your response, please.
One thing that comes to mind about everything we're talking about is priorities and how we spend the money for the state. For me, there's many issues that the 40th is dealing with, ranging from private property rights and increase in taxes on private property. But as far as legislation, it would have to be, for me, it all comes down to the budget and how we handle transportation. Being a carpenter and being in the construction industry for 18 years, you look how the money is spent and where the money goes. Right now we have some serious issues with transportation and how the money's spent, and we need to address some of the issues here within our own district. And the ferry service to the San Juans, for instance, we are down to 4 ferries, and it's impacting the economy in the regions tremendously, for tourism, for those who are, for the transport of goods and services between the islands back and forth to the mainland. So for me, it would have to do with infrastructure.
Thank you. And Candidate Ramel, your response, please.
So it's really important to me as a state representative to listen to folks. And I've been out in the communities throughout this district, knocking on more than 3,000 doors, asking folks what's important to them, what matters to them. And overwhelmingly, the issue that has the most impact on folks' lives right now is the cost of housing. We need more homes people can afford. I served for 6 years on the Board of Trustees at Colshan Community Land Trust, building homes people can afford. And so I know the important role that the state government plays in making the budgets work. Top priority for me next year, top priority legislation is fully funding our Washington State Housing Trust Fund. 10 years ago, the fund was at $200 million for the biennium. This last year, it was down to $107 million. We're in the middle of an affordable housing crisis. We need to act like it, and we need to budget accordingly. Thanks.
Thank you. Question number 3. Are there any legislative measures you support or propose to promote responsible gun ownership and reduce gun violence? And we're going to start with Candidate Miller, please.
So you want to know what I support coming from the state level or the national level?
State.
Okay. So first of all, I support the Second Amendment. I support this First Amendment. It seems like in our current culture today, there seems to be an attack on the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. So, you know, maybe an idea would be that teaching in school, gun safety, hunter safety. Years ago, I took hunter safety, and I haven't done a lot of hunting. I've done some hunting, a little elk hunting, a little deer hunting, never bear hunting. But in schools, maybe teaching responsible gun ownership and hunter safety would be a good start. You know, plus we can have a forum. I would love to have a forum up here in Whatcom County to talk about solutions to the problem. There's some people that shouldn't be anywhere near a gun as far as you know some of the shootings that have gone on, but I do support the Second Amendment and the First Amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Petrish, your response, please.
When I spent 4.5 years in Bosnia as an interpreter, I also got to see what happens when an unarmed populace has to face their own government and the neighbors who don't like them very much. 300,000 dead and 1.5 million refugees in less than 4 years. So I'm a staunch supporter of the Constitution and, more importantly, the right to free speech, but also the right that the Second Amendment allows every person in this country to have, and that's the right to bear arms. Now, I grew up in a family that were in law enforcement. After my family came to this country, my grandfather, when he was speaking Croatian as a child, he learned English, and he became assimilated as an American, and he became a police officer and then worked for Skagit County Sheriff's Department. I've grown up with firearms. My children know how to handle firearms. I've taught them how to handle firearms. When I was in high school, we'd go hunting before school. We'd come to school with guns in our vehicles. We never had a shooting. So something's changed in our culture that we need to address.
Thank you. Candidate Browne, your response, please.
So first and foremost, I support an assault weapons ban. I think it's just nuts that we have, we call them hunting weapons. I have a piece of property up in Custer, 90 acres, it's beautiful. I let people walk on it. I have two rules, no vehicles and no hunting, and I've got trail cameras up there, and frequently people are running around with assault weapons. And this is on my land, by the way. I raised the age limit to non-hunting weapons to 21. I don't think it's appropriate for school-age people going to school to be able to carry a concealed weapon or a pistol. I would significantly increase the background checks, particularly for mental health issues, and I would support the loss of weapons for anybody who's got a restraining order or is being convicted of stalking or domestic violence. The country I grew up in had one mass shooting, had its last mass shooting about 20-odd years ago, and the whole country just said enough. So they had a complete ban on assault weapons, and the government hasn't taken over the citizens yet.
Thank you. Candidate Ramel, your response, please.
So I gathered signatures for, signed, and encourage everyone here to vote for Initiative 1639. My campaign has been certified as a gun sense candidate by Moms Demand Action. I would absolutely support a ban on assault weapons and a ban on high-capacity magazines that make mass shootings so much worse. And I'd advocate for and will support requiring common-sense safe storage measures to require gun owners to be responsible. And with respect, Michael, that's very different from violating the Second Amendment, and it's very different from disarming the population. Thanks.
Thank you. Candidate Lekanoff, your response, please.
Thank you so much. You know, my daughter's 14, goes to public school. She came home at the age of 7, and she was so afraid. She said, "Mom, they're telling me to hide behind a desk and to hide because someone's going to be in our school with a gun." It rose the awareness for me as an Alaska Native who grew up hunting and fishing that I agree there's a change in society on what guns mean to people. Last night I had the wonderful opportunity to share a table with Tom and Alex at the Moms Demand Action, which I have a distinction. My campaign has the distinction awareness. I too believe that the age limit should be raised. I believe practical gun sense responsibility is important. I believe the practices and the storage is important. I also believe that the background check needs to be addressed. But more importantly, I think the moms, the dads, the grandparents out there who are raising awareness and saying we can do better as parents and we can do better as an America to protect ourselves and those around us.
Thank you. And finally, candidate Pasma, your response.
Thank you. I believe in the Second Amendment, but with every right comes responsibilities. I have trained firearm safety training in Washington, Colorado, Montana. I'm a volunteer firefighter. I have been on scenes with shootings. I have trained for mass shootings in schools. I've done all that. And you know what? Common sense solutions as a gun owner myself, my entire life, we are safer when we have responsible gun ownership. Training, background checks, magazine. You know, I talked about this the other night. If people are not aware of some of the ammunition that civilians can get their hands on, and my friend Michael here would know this being in a combat zone, the ammunition used for war has no reason to be in civilian hands, and the damage it does. So yes, majority of people want common sense gun legislation, and I would back that. Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 4. How do you assess current efforts to prevent accidents during the transport of volatile fuels through your district and across the state? Do you think additional legislation is necessary to lessen the likelihood of future damaging events? Please explain why or why not. And we'll start with candidate Lekanoff.
Thank you. You know, in the work that I've done in protection of the Salish Sea at the international, federal, state, provincial level, one of the big topics that's been a priority in my career has been addressing the impacts of vessel traffic upon the Salish Sea. We worked very hard on trying to identify who's in charge of the Salish Sea to say enough is enough. Enough is enough on transporting volatile, hazardous materials such as the Bakken shale oil and the coal through our waterways. It is an absolute honor for me to say that though there are 5 reports that are being done by various different agencies, wearing my career hat today, we are able to take a look at what the vessel traffic impact is upon the Salish Sea, where it impacts our endangered species, and where it impacts those places where our commercial and treaty fishermen fish. If anyone's going to be in control of the Salish Sea, I strongly believe that the science facts law that we bring out of the 40th is going to be important to say who's in charge, and I say we're in charge.
Thank you. Candidate Ramel, your response, please.
Thanks for this question. I've worked for most of the last 6 or 7 years trying to stop some of these fossil fuel export projects that are threatening our communities and threatening the Salish Sea. We've done a great job here locally in holding the thin green line, but there's more still to do. At the state level, there's a couple of important measures that I think we need to implement in the next year. We need a rescue tug stationed in the San Juans to prevent a spill. And we need to require that those transporting crude oil and tar sands oil and fracked shale oils through the Salish Sea need to fully account for the costs of preventing spills and need to be prepared to fully pay for the costs of cleaning up those spills to the highest possible standard. Thanks.
Thank you. Candidate Petrish, your response, please.
Well, considering we have 4 refineries in North Puget Sound and the transfer and transport of fuel via rail and pipeline and by shipping are going to be ongoing, we need to be diligent in protecting the environment and the protocols necessary for that to take place. I have to take issue with what Alex just said about rescue tug as any ship that comes into Puget Sound that's transporting any kind of fuel has 2 tugs that escort it into the Puget Sound already. As far as responding to any kind of spill, absolutely. We have to have those emergency response teams in place. There has to be training, and we need to continue to protect our environment in case of any kind of unfortunate incident, whether it be a derailment, whether it be running aground, and unfortunately, if there has to be a catastrophic event such as an explosion, which does happen with man-made materials, no matter where it be, whether it be on the rail, whether it be inland, or whether it be inside.
Okay, thank you. I believe, Candidate Ramel, you have a challenge, and we'll wait till everyone answers this, and then we'll address that. Candidate Pasma, your response, please.
Thank you. So we're talking about water shipment and pipeline and rail, I believe, right? So absolutely, right now we are a carbon-based economy, right? And we need to start working our way off of that and adjust in a sustainable way. It's not going to happen in 1 year, 2 years, but we need to hold those companies absolutely accountable if there is any spills and be the best prepared that we can. You know, as a volunteer firefighter, I had meetings when you had derailments on the, with the rails, and those tankers that were carrying that were not updated. But also, that's something you might not know about. The communities were not aware of those trains coming through their communities, and we pushed to make sure that they have to notify communities now with those trains and update those rail cars to be the safest they can be. So absolutely holding them accountable, making them stand up, be part of the community, be part of the solution to make sure that whatever fuel they are transporting is done in the safest manner for the community and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Brown, your response, please.
So I'll start by just correcting something Mr. Pasma said earlier. Actually it's me who's the only one who's actually worked as an elected official, and therefore the only one who's sponsored and actually voted to pass legislation, part of which is the one we're working on at the moment with the Whatcom County Council and have done for the last 18 months, which is to deal with the issue of the transportation of hazardous materials, predominantly oil by rail, through the county. And I'll tell you why the issue is so important. The oil comes out of the ground at the wellhead. It's then put onto tanker cars and transferred via rail on tanker cars to the refinery. The hazardous part, the most hazardous part, is the part in the transportation by rail. Each of those tanker cars is owned by an individual LLC, typically, which has no assets. If there is a derailment, there is no one to point the finger at. The refinery's not responsible because it's not their property yet. The wellhead's not responsible because they already sold it. And the rail company, well, they were just providing the rail tracks and the engine. So I've been working along with my fellow council members to do the maximum amount we can to prevent a catastrophic event in the county.
Thank you. Candidate Miller, your response, please.
So, yeah, right now we need to, our cars drive on gas and our planes fly on gas. We need to be able to transport gas, oil, coal by rail and pipeline, but we need to make sure it's done in a safe manner, and I think make sure that the people who drive the trains are trained well. Amtrak had some problems recently, and if one of the oil trains crashed like Amtrak did down around Tacoma, that could be disastrous. Of course, we don't want oil in the water, like the BP refinery explosion down there in Louisiana, I guess. It took months to clean it up. It got on seals and birds. And so we just need to make sure that it's done in a safe manner. Good safety training, emergency crews on tap. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Candidate Ramel, you have 45 seconds to challenge Candidate Petrish. Go ahead.
Sure. So I just wanted to return to the question of rescue tugs and tug escorts for ships carrying crude oil through the Salish Sea. You're correct in that the larger ships require escort tugs, but the smaller articulated tug barges do not require escorts. And 2 of those have broken and spilled their transportation, their fuel oil, off the BC coast within the last couple of years. So I wonder if we could find some common ground today. Would you support legislation requiring either rescue tugs so that those spills can be responded to, or requiring that articulated tug barges would require an additional escort tug?
Candidate Petrish, do you wish to respond?
Of course. I would never discourage protecting the environment when it comes to our waterway. So looking at what would be necessary and how many tugs we're talking about, I mean, those would all be part of the conversation. No, I would never be opposed to legislation for protecting the environment.
Okay, thank you. Question number 5. What do you think are the best opportunities for economic development and job creation in your district? And we'll start with candidate Browne.
Well, this is a great question. When I came onto the council, one of the things we were dealing with was the update to the Whatcom County Comprehensive Plan. The economic development section hadn't been updated for years, and so I looked at it from the perspective of the 30 years I'd been in business, and I said, what's the best way to create good long-term growth in family wage jobs? And I looked at it I said, if this was a business, how would I do it? And the answer was I would focus on the community's strengths. So I designed a plan that identified the top 10 areas where the community has something of real value on the international markets. And then the idea is that we focus on taking those issues or taking those resources and promoting those to people who need them. The number one on that list is cybersecurity graduates. Whatcom Community College has one of the best cybersecurity schools in the entire nation. There is 1.5 million vacant jobs worldwide for cybersecurity graduates. The problem is we educate them and then we export them. And I've been working to find a way to keep them here and grow the industry here.
Thank you. Candidate Pasma, your response.
The greatest ability to achieve new and continuing jobs and businesses in our 40th district. You know, I'd like to just give you a little history lesson, go back a little bit. I grew up in a Roosevelt household in Montana. And in 1946, the largest GI Bill ever passed in the United States history was passed by Democrats. And what that did, my father was one of them, being a World War II vet. It gave an opportunity. They invested in their citizens to give them an education, and it put more people on farms than any time in the history of our country. And what I call for is a super fund for workers. I'm the only one talking about that. And a just transition. You know, we've had a super fund for environmental cleanups. We've had a super fund for bankers. We've had a super fund for Wall Street. And we just seen the wealthiest 1% get a super fund. We spend more money in this country on dirt than we have workers. We need to educate. If we're actually going to transition into a green economy, we need to educate and give everyone an opportunity and have a just transition. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Lekanoff, your response, please.
I'm excited for this one. So, you know, education is my platform. I'm really excited to say education builds sustainable communities. And building jobs, when I'm out there door knocking and meeting with school systems, the excitement they see is we want to build an education platform that starts early on to job placement. This means in your school systems, we need to go back and remind everybody has a role in the community. Whether you go to a higher education, whether you become a carpenter, a journeyman, or electrician. In meeting with the unions within this, and I'm endorsed by Washington State Labor Union, I was proud to say there are many people and young people out there who need funding and support for technical colleges. We need everybody out there. Everyone wants to be part of the community and be proud of their jobs. Real quickly, out at Orcas, they have a Oasis program. These young kids are building tiny houses in high school with solar panels along them. Along those solar panels, these young high school kids are building it. Their children will live it. Renewable energy jobs and practical job sensibility is important, I think, for our district. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Miller, your response.
Well, so the 40th district, you know, is part of Whatcom, part of San Juan, and part of Skagit. And so first let me say, I live on San Juan Island, but I have great ties to Whatcom County. My sister is a teacher up there in Ferndale who teaches occasionally in Mount Vernon, and I've got my brother and his wife and 4 kids up there in Linden. So in the 3 districts, you know, we have a lot of things going on. We've got tech, we've got tourism, we've got farming, and small business, which I support all those. Incidentally, I started a small business up there in Friday Harbor, so I know how to operate a business in good times and bad. Tourism, you know, we need to increase tourism. There's things we can do to help farmers, tech. I do support solar panels. It would be really nice maybe to make really amazing solar panels to help people not have to pay so much on electricity. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Ramel, your response, please.
Thanks for the question. I spent 7 years working for a small business membership association, helping to identify ways to help businesses here in Whatcom County succeed. One of the things I learned while doing that work is that too much of our economic development resources are focused on trying to bring in sort of big new companies from outside the community, and too little of our resources is invested in trying to help the companies that are already here, where the owners are here and invested and working hard in our community. I think one of the most important things that we can do to continue to grow a successful economy in this region is to protect the things that make the 40th District an attractive place to live and to work and to own a business, to locate a business, and then to make sure that the community is accessible to workers, meaning good education and affordable housing.
Thank you. And candidate Petrish, your response, please.
The best way for growth economically is to have less regulation, have less taxes, and allow opportunity for investment. When you look at what happened in Seattle with the head tax, we're all seeing how outrageous that was. To put taxes on local businesses discourages economic growth. And we saw what happened with the ironworkers. They fully understood the impact that was going to have on their lives by more regulation. And we can't tax ourselves into prosperity. When the ironworkers were down there chanting no head tax, that's exactly what they meant. You can't penalize companies for growth by imposing more taxes on them. It doesn't promote. We need to, as legislators, we need to create an atmosphere of growth and protect industries that provide jobs and allow them to grow. And when we do that, a lot of the issues that we're dealing with, whether it be low-income housing or not enough housing or people on the streets, when businesses are growing and there's more investment, we can address that as well.
Thank you. Question number 6. Do you think the state has a role in ensuring there is affordable access to health care for all of Washington's citizens? If so, what measures would you pursue? And we'll start with candidate Ramel.
Yes, I believe quality health care is a basic human right. I support Medicare for all because it will lead to better care for more people for less money. I signed Initiative 1600, was disappointed that it didn't pass. Or didn't get the ballots necessary to get on the signatures necessary to get on the ballot this year. I'll continue to advocate for Medicare for all. In the meantime, there are important measures we can implement in the next couple of years that will improve quality of care, will improve the number of people covered and access to services. One of the top priorities needs to be our state's mental health care system. Thanks.
Thank you. Candidate Lekanoff, your response, please.
Yes, I believe the state does. Being in the federal healthcare system myself, I clearly understand the challenges and opportunities that we can build together. Underneath my role in my career, we worked on passing state legislation that allowed the dental healthcare therapist bill to pass, which provides preventive care for young children, allowing young children to learn how to take care of their dental needs. We all know the #1 reason, or one of the primary reasons, of coming into an emergency room is dental health care. I believe that there's an opportunity for us to pass state legislation, and it's going to take time to implement quality health care. And coming from a government health care system myself, which I think some of my candidates up here have also experienced, I too believe that if we're going to do it, let's do it right, and let's do it with quality.
Thank you. Candidate Pasma, your response, please.
I absolutely believe that health care is a human right. And as someone here, the only person on this stage here that was asked to work on the Affordable Care Act over the state of Washington, we worked really hard. I'm a universal health care person. And think about this. If we did pass universal health care, first year alone, we'd save $175 billion. That's $175 billion. We absolutely The number one reason for people filing bankruptcy was due to health care costs, right? Medical, and it's really unbelievable in this country. You work your entire life and work as hard as you can, and you have the unfortunate circumstance of getting a medical condition, you could lose everything. And that's just not right. We need to enhance it, just like any great program that we've developed in this country, and now we're watching it be dismantled in front of our very eyes, and a lot of people are suffering when they do not have to be suffering. We owe it to society to make sure we lift everyone up. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Petrish, your response, please.
Well, what Tom just said, if you've read my bio, you know I'm a widower. And I lost my wife to breast cancer. And going through that was devastating. And so when Tom talks about people losing their homes and being on the street, going through what healthcare opportunities are out there, you know, I belong to a union. I belong to the Carpenters Union. And if we did not have the coverage that we have, I would hate to imagine what my life would be like right now. At the same time, competition is lowering cost of everything. And when we have the opportunity for, like, if you look at laser surgery, for cataract surgery, there's surgeries and procedures that were astronomical at the time when they were first induced, but the more people that got involved with it, it brought the price down. We could be able to do that across the board. And anybody out there that has lost a family member to cancer or has somebody that's going through cancer, my heart goes out to you because I've been there.
Thank you. Candidate Miller, your response, please.
So, first, I want to announce to everybody the truth. The truth is, I'm not a doctor, and I don't want to, healthcare is very personal, and I don't want to sit up here and make your healthcare decisions. It's very complicated, it's very complex, you know, and then with some of these healthcare programs and stuff, you know, they have attorneys, and then they have, what do you call that? Anyway, a lot of people working on it. So, having said that, I believe healthcare cost is too high. There is a problem with medical malpractice. My grandmother up at the Everett Hospital, she had severe medical malpractice. They cut off both of her legs. She ended up dying. As far as Social Security, I'm not running for Congress, but Social Security has been raided. And stolen from. And there's a lot of money out there, so we can keep Social Security, we can keep Medicare. There's actually more money in the state of Washington and the federal government than the politicians like to let on. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Candidate Brown, your response, please.
So I'll just start by saying when the Affordable Care Act came in, the Insurance Careers Commissioner, Mike Kreidler, set up a committee to do the implementation of that, and I am, I believe, the only one here. Well, in fact, I know I'm the only one here that actually sat on that committee. And the work I did on that was why Mike Kreidler, the State Insurance Commissioner, has endorsed my campaign, because he knows my passion for the issue of healthcare. Healthcare, access to healthcare is critical. I grew up in, I've lived in 2 countries with universal healthcare, and a couple of key data points. One is America now ranks, it's probably actually lower now, number 50 in infant mortality, and number 50 in life expectancy. There are 49 other countries that are better on both points. We pay roughly twice as much money than everybody else. What I would do, I'd start with dealing with prescription drug costs. I can buy the same prescription here for, call it $300. I can buy it across the border for $100. I'd enact policies to provide stop-loss coverage, and I would protect the pre-existing condition clause.
Okay, thank you. The final question. Do you think the legislature has complied with the McCleary decision requiring our state to fully fund our schools? Why or why not? And we'll start with candidate Petrish.
Well, as far as full funding of education, that is something that is our responsibility as legislators and as parents. But at the same time, we also have to allow parents to have the choice if they choose to be a homeschooler, if they want to have the opportunity for any other opportunity to teach their children. One size fits all is, because right now, if you look at the school systems, we're failing our children. Truly. We are not able to compete with other countries, and it's sad. I'm a union carpenter, and we have people that are in the trades because feel that's the only thing they have to do, or the only opportunity. We're teaching basic math skills because people are graduating high school without basic math skills. These are issues we need to address, and parents have to have the opportunity for the best education for their child.
Thank you. Candidate Lekanoff, your response, please.
Thank you so much. You know, let's be really clear. Education is education, should not be defined by the word McCleary. Education is something that's very important. I, too, believe that though we were able to have one of the largest infusions of investment in education, there's a role as a state legislature, and that is to make sure that that money retains and that we, too, grow into the funding that's needed for special education, for mental health counselors, back into the programs and the curriculum that should be developed for our children. It's amazing how much of an opportunity we can have when we invest in our education. It builds community sustainability, it builds our future, it builds our young leaders of tomorrow. My daughter at 14, I'm quite lucky, is attending the public school system. She says, "Mom, I want to be here." She has a choice, and she chooses to be in a public school system that she believes in. And I'm as invested in those systems as she is.
Thank you. Candidate Browne, your response, please.
Has McCleary been implemented yet? No. As the state met its responsibilities yet? No. And it will take time. It will take time, if for no other reason than in order to reduce class sizes, you have to build the additional classrooms, you have to train the additional teachers, and that hasn't happened yet. But I think the bigger question here is we have to, as a culture, change our focus from complaining about what we spend on education to focusing on what we're going to invest on education. If you look throughout human history, cultures that grow and become successful are those that invest in the education of the next generation. Our predecessors did that. We have to do that. If we don't do that, we're abdicating the most fundamental responsibility we have to our children. On the county council, I haven't had much opportunity because of the nature of the work to have much involvement in education, but I will tell you this. Every time the health department has come to us and said, would you support an early intervention program or a student support program, whether it be for drug or alcohol counselling or anything else, I have supported it. I will continue to do so.
Thank you. Candidate Miller, your response, please.
Well, so the Supreme Court said that we need to fully fund education. So we need to work on that, you know, like Mr. Browne said, over time, find the money. But we need to, that's true, get beyond that. I, like Mike Petrish, support homeschools, I support private schools, and I support the public school system. My sister is a public school teacher up there in Ferndale. We need to make sure the money's spent well. We need to invest in education. We need to maybe make sure that shop class is taught at schools, and drama class. I've known of some schools, they phased out shop class, metal shop class, and wood shop class, and whittled drama class down to nothing. So we need to keep investing in education, but make sure education dollars are spent well, and a careful spending of education dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Ramel, your response, please.
So as a parent of a student who attends Bellingham High School, I know that every kid belongs in a top quality school. The McCleary fix is an important step in that direction, but it's simply not enough. We're not done. I spoke with a teacher at high school in Anacortes who has 32 kids in his class right now. That's too much. So we've, over the last couple of years, we've made investments that are bringing down classroom sizes in kindergarten through 3rd grade. We still need to fully fund education. We need to bring down classroom sizes in 4th through senior year of high school. We also need to make deeper investment in early learning so that every kid who needs preschool can get it, so that they show up for kindergarten ready to learn. And I believe that we need to fund guidance counselors in every school in Washington State. Thanks.
Thank you. And Candidate Pasma, your response, please.
Thank you. No, I do not believe that they fully funded it, but they did not do it sustainable. And you know, that's what's happened here lately is our legislature's passed some feel-good measures, but they really haven't done anything on the budgetary side, and you need to do that. You know, education is an investment. It's the #1 best investment we can ever make, ever. One thing I left out when I was telling you about the World War II story and Superfund was when we did that, that's what turned our country into a superpower. Why did I leave Montana 30 years ago? Because of lack of opportunity. I moved to Washington to opportunity. And why do you have that opportunity here? Because you invested in education. That's why you have the technology companies. You have one of the highest earned incomes because of education. We as a society, is the greatest thing we can do is invest in education. We will always be successful and we will get our money back 100 times over. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, you all have the opportunity to make a 1-minute closing statement. So, Candidate Lekanoff, we'll start with you.
Sure, thank you. First and foremost, thank you to the 40th for investing in me. You know, there's a couple areas I want to focus on. In my campaign as a state legislature, I really would like to be focused on the tax reform. I want to focus on education. And I want to protect the environment and the Salish Sea. Every one of us are committed to it. I want to be able to take a look at some critical issues. Incarceration is big, and I know, and I'm hearing it at the doors in this community. Making bigger jails is not the answer. Addressing the holistic approach from a mental health and a community area. You're going to hear the word community a lot in my campaign. Remember, community is with we, and it's not with I. You're going to hear 7 generations in my campaign. That means layering and addressing the decisions that are made on the values of the 40th. To remember the people behind us who fought for us and the people ahead of us that we're making plans for. I want to also make sure that we take a look and make sure that if we're going to grow the 40th, that we grow it in a way that reflects all of you, and remembering how our first people protected it, and then making sure that we create a future for all of us that has job sustainability, whether it's labor, new jobs, or new people who are calling this place home.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Candidate Petrish, your response, please. Your closing statement.
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to spend some time up here in Bellingham and share some ideas and talk a little bit about what's important to those of us here in the 40th Legislative District. As I mentioned before, you know, a child of an immigrant family and a refugee family, you grow up as a fisherman, and working in a fishing family, you understand hard work and a lot of hours, and sometimes there's not a lot of pay in those hours. And that's what legislators do. They put in a lot of time and effort. And the Croatian soccer team placed second in the World Cup, which was a real hoop for all of us that are of the Croatian background. But it showed the tenacity of the team and the belief in what they can do when they come together. And always remember, Croatia was the smallest team in the tournament, 4.5 million people, but they placed second of other things. And what I mentioned by that, remember, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog, and I intend to take that to Olympia to represent you in every issue that comes across the table. I will look at it fairly and squarely and make the right decision for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Ramel, your closing statement.
Thanks. And just reiterate my gratitude to the League of Women Voters for organizing this event. So just leave you with a reminder of a couple of endorsements that I think make me really stand out in this race. These are endorsements by organizations that are on the front lines of working for policy changes on some of the most important issues. The only candidate in this race endorsed by the Washington Conservation Voters, the only candidate in the race endorsed by the Washington Housing Alliance Action Fund, and the only candidate endorsed by Our Revolution. These endorsements come not only because of alignment of vision on policy issues, but also from confidence and experience that comes from knowing the way that I build coalitions and bring folks together. And just wrap up by saying thank you to my fellow candidates up here. Thanks for the discussion and the conversation. I always enjoy these. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Brown, your closing statement.
The challenge for you is not which Democrat will support education, environmental protection, low-income housing, affordable healthcare, women's health, or social justice. I believe all the Democrats will. But because there is never enough money for all good work, which one of us has the most experience to wisely allocate money between the programs? Which is the most qualified to manage the $100 billion of your money the legislator spends annually? I believe I am the most qualified. 230 endorsements, including 20 local elected officials, agree. But I want to ask you to read everybody's literature, visit everybody's websites, look for the proof that we know policy and how we're going to pay for things. I want to go to Olympia not because I need a job or aspire to a long-term political career. I simply want to do what I've always done, to serve the community I've called home for 24 years to the best of my ability. Thank you. I would appreciate your vote.
Thank you. Candidate Pasma, your closing statement, please.
Thank you. You know, I'm a small business owner, rancher, volunteer leader, volunteer firefighter, and a proud progressive Democrat. I'm the only person in this race that has actually had legislation passed on a bipartisan effort on a wide range of issues as a volunteer. I'm a 16-year officer of the Washington State Democrats. I'm a 16-year officer of the 40th Legislative District Democrats. I have done everything I can to make this a fair and better world from when I was a little child. We grew up with those. You know, I'm the only person that was awarded the Conservation of the Year Award in 2015. 2015, Governor Inslee made my farm a model of sustainability, and I had 100 scientists, climate and environmental scientists come from around the United States to see how I'd done this. I'm the only person on this panel that has worked for 10 years under 2 governors with the Samish Watershed Initiative. We've made great strides. You can do the same thing in Lake Whatcom. I would really appreciate your vote, and if you would like to talk with me later, please feel free. Thank you very much, League of Women Voters, for holding this forum.
Thank you. And finally, Candidate Miller, your closing statement, please.
So I'm Daniel Miller. Remember, Daniel Miller. I hope you have your pencil sharpened. The ballots are out. First of all, let me say, I was astounded how much tax money from Whatcom County goes to Olympia. There's a lot of money that goes from around the state to Olympia, and we need to make sure that money is spent well. I also don't want to harp on the subject, but I like to know where that marijuana tax money went. That can be used for a variety of things, and that's really important. I want to work on transportation. I want to work on jobs in a good local economy, maintaining freedom and liberty, careful spending, educational policy, property rights, and water rights. I also didn't really get a chance to talk about agriculture and salmon recovery, but that's a whole topic of its own. Please remember, Daniel Miller for State 2018. Thank you.
Thank you. So please join me in thanking and acknowledging all these candidates who care enough about our community to run for public office.